To this point, Wilbur Ross, who is the U.S. Commerce Secretary under President Trump, joining us now live. Secretary Ross, great to call you that. Thank you for coming in. Good to see you again.
Thank you for having me.
So first of all, this meeting of Trumka and President Trump, it's kind of an odd couple, isn't it? I mean, you have just recently, when President Trump was running for president, Trumka was saying all kinds of horrible things about him. What do they have in common? What common goals do they share?
Oh, I think they share a very common goal of helping the American worker. There may be some nuances, some differences in how to do it, but that's the overarching objective of the president and of Mr. Trumka.
But let's just take one of the ways in which you can have different opinions on helping the American worker. Mr. Trump is very much against right-to-work laws. President Trump says he's 100% in favor of those laws. President Trump is also against this enforced raising of the minimum wage to $15 an hour that Mr. Trump is for. And, of course, Scott Walker. President Trump is a big defender of Scott Walker, who Mr. Trumka thinks is an enemy of public sector unions. On those points, I don't think there's any room for agreement. Do you?
Well, that may be not, but those aren't the only points, and they aren't the main points. The main points is that, in my view, is how do you get more Americans back into the workforce and employed? That's the real objective for the country, and I'm sure that's an important objective to Mr. Trumka as well.
Talk about objectives for the country. One of those objectives is getting better trade deals and getting better deals on particular issues in which our trading partners may have violated certain rules, stuff that they've been getting away with in the past. You had a terrific penalty that was accepted by a Chinese company. I think it's one of the largest penalties on record, $661 million. This is a telecommunications firm in China that apparently was selling stuff to Iran and North Korea that it shouldn't have been. Would you explain how the negotiation on that developed and who was responsible?
Right. Well, first of all, it's not $660 million. It's $1,190 million. A portion of which is being held back from being paid right now as an incentive for their continued compliance over the next 7 years to very rigorous auditing and other measures that the government will be taking to make sure that they fly straight and no longer make illegal shipments to North Korea or to Iran.
But was this all you're doing, or was this something that was started in the previous administration?
It certainly was not all my doing. It was basically the doing of the Bureau of Industrial Security, which is part of the Department of Commerce. It then brought in the Department of Justice, brought in the Treasury Department as well. So it was a collaboration among all of those departments. Obviously, Department of Justice is the one who filed the actual papers.
Congratulations on that. Also of trade concern, and particularly to folks out there, business people, they're worried that the Trump administration may get too concerned with things like a trade deficit. And in particular, they're looking at Peter Navarro, something that he said and about our current trade deficit endangering national security. Back in the 1980s, there was concern about trade deficits as well. In fact, we pulled up a 1985 copy of the New York Times, which was talking about the record trade deficit in 1984. It was a huge trade deficit in 1984. The problem with that is that was the same year, 1984, when we had a 7.3% growth rate. So sometimes you can have record trade deficits and very strong growth simultaneously, right?
Yes, but the fact that two things are concurrent doesn't remotely suggest that there's a causal connection between the two.
No, but it doesn't mean that trade deficits necessarily cause small growth, because in that year we had record growth.
We'll never know how much more growth there would have been without the trade deficit, but there surely would have been more.
More than 7.3%.
Sure.
Wow. All right. Well, is this concern about trade deficits going to lead to any problems, do you think, in terms of something that might escalate into a trade war?
Well, we've been in a trade war for quite a long time. The only difference is that our troops are now coming to the ramparts. That's the difference.
You know, Donald Trump loves to use Twitter accounts. I don't know if you knew that, but there was one Twitter that he sent out recently about fake news, and I just want to get you to react to it. He said, "Don't let the fake news tell you that there is big infighting in the Trump administration. We're getting along great and getting major things done." Now, I've talked to people in the administration. They say that's absolutely true. People are getting along. But I'm just curious, what do you think when you read stories that are so contrary to what you see with your own eyes and hear with your own ears? How do you respond to that personally?
Well, there is a lot of fake news. I don't think there's any question about that. In fact, in my own case, that during the campaign and then pre-confirmation, several people fraudulently opened up Facebook accounts or Twitter accounts in my name. So that's how far some of these people have gone.
Do you know whether any of those false tweets or Facebook messages were picked up by the media as the real thing?
I don't know. I don't worry about things like that. I'm trying to deal with the 47,000 people who work in commerce, with the various trade agreements that we have and will have, with the various sanctions that we have to implement. We're quite busy doing real work, not worrying about this or that stray news item.
Well, it's a month and a half, and you already got $1 billion from a Chinese company. I'd say that's a pretty good record. Commerce Secretary Ross, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Okay. Don't annualize that rate.
Okay. Thank you very much, Secretary.